who are the real heroes in my life today? And I'd have to say at the very beginning, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and eternally, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Mabel Reynolds Ostrander. She came over from England when she was 17. They went to Buffalo, New York. They came to California. And I remember my fondest memories begin about age 7 when her husband, my papa, my grandfather, died of double pneumonia when I was 7. My brother was just born. And I remember my grandmother then was she was 50 or 49, and she lived 37 to 40 more years by herself in a little framed house. Never had any money and tended a garden. And my grandmother was the greatest influence on my life of any other living hero. She never complained, ever once, in her 87 years that I knew. She never thought much about herself except to present herself in such a way to be clean, to be moral, to be honest, to be nice, to be good, to listen, to give, and always to give. I would come over on my bicycle and I would ride 10 miles on my bike for the privilege of mowing her lawn every Saturday. What a thrill for her to say, "Wow, that's a great lawn. You deserve a piece of pie. You're doing really well, but you could do a little this. Why don't you edge it? Why don't you put the grass that you put in the catcher, put that for mulch, and we'll grow these flowers, and we'll get this plum tree, the combination of an apricot and a plum tree." My grandmother was the epitome of making me feel special, like I had a special future, that I was a good boy. So I was riding away from my mother's home into her mother's home, full of love and encouragement. And she was the greatest role model I've ever had, because I still look at her as the person I have loved the most in my life, including, of course, my children and my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and my best friends. Certainly, my grandmother fits in the #1 spot, and I know that my own children feel that way. It's too bad my grandchildren didn't ever really get to know her, because she was somebody really special, and I think of her almost every day of my life before I go to bed, when I wake up. That's what a real hero is in your life, somebody who encourages you, compliments you, nurtures you, and has your interest at heart. That's the way she was, my grandma, Mabel Reynolds Ostrander. Of course, my next role model, I have to say, had to be my dad, although he left home when I was 9. And they were divorced later, and he went into World War II, and he became on a merchant marine ship. But what my dad did for me, I didn't realize until later. He would come into my room at night, but he never hit me, and he was never mean to us, even though maybe their marriage was not happy. And before he left that fateful day in the 1940s, he came into my room, leaned back against the light switch, and blew my light out. And he would always say, "Just remember, son, when your light goes out, it's dark all over the world." I said, "Not so." I said, "We learned that there are different time zones, and they're waking up in different parts of the world as I'm sleeping." He said, "No, the only world you'll ever know is the one between your left and your right ear. It's the universe within, and you're living strictly in your own mind. And so when the world is dark, so is yours. When the world is happy, so is yours. When the world is encouraging, so is yours. When the world is painful, so is your world. And your world exists the way you observe it. And therefore, my son, remember, life is a perception through the eye of the beholder. It's not what happens so much that counts in life. It's how you take it and what you make of it. And I give you the proposition, son, to make life the best life you can possibly have, because your light only shines through your eyes, the way you're looking at it. And then he left. And I saw him once a year, and he was proud of me, I'm sure, and he encouraged me to go to the Naval Academy because right after World War II, the Korean War broke out when I was in high school. And all of my classmates were getting drafted. I wanted to go to Stanford or USC and be a motion picture producer, wanted to be something really great. And instead, I went to the Naval Academy and became a pilot and served my time in the military and served my country. And I would gladly die for my country. I gladly would die for the idea of being free to express myself in a free country without fear of a dictator telling me I can't say this or can't do that. Of course I would. The next hero in my life was Dr. Jonas Salk, the developer of the first polio vaccine. To make a long story short, Dr. Salk and I developed a relationship where I became like his spokesperson for the general public. So I would go out and give speeches, and I worked for the development department as a fundraiser for the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. And I became like a voice for Dr. Jonas Salk to the public to raise money. And I remember him, one of the most brilliant microbiologists and virologists I've ever met, in addition to my best friend, Dr. Myron Wentz, who is similar to Jonas Salk in my mind, but is also my best friend. But Jonas Salk looked me in the eye and said, "You know, Dennis, you're a very interesting young man. You articulate pretty well. You're very bright. You're optimistic. And I encourage you to put science behind what you say and do. In other words, don't just tell people they can do anything they want, be anything they want, and give them this general feeling of Pollyanna. Be a science-based, fact-based, truth-based deliverer of knowledge and information. Don't tell people they can walk on water unless they have pontoons." So he said, tell people they can do things that are just out of their present reach, but not totally out of sight. And to tell them to keep their vision solidly in front of them and base it on truth, knowledge, and fact, rather than just on the idea of get rich quick. You can make $1 billion, you can be a billionaire, you can get rich in the next 90 days, drink this, read this, buy this, listen to this, watch this, and your worries are over. Those are the purveyors of Pollyanna and the purveyors of get rich quick. And he said, don't be one of those. And so as the developer of the first effective polio vaccine, he encouraged me, and he also introduced me to some very important people. He introduced me to Carl Rogers, who headed the Center for the Study of the Person, who was the first one to use the idea that when people tell you something, that you tell them back in your own words what you think they were telling you, so that you give them credit for their opinion or the question or what their proposition is. In other words, you validate other people by the way you answer their question. Carl Rogers was one he introduced me to. Then he introduced me to, if you will, Viktor Frankl. You may or may not have heard of Viktor Frankl. I know you have, Ralph. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who was in Auschwitz and Dachau during the Holocaust. He led the resistance movement in the Holocaust. And he wrote this incredible book that is the centerpiece for most motivational speakers' premises for speaking. In other words, you don't ask God for your purpose. God asks you for your purpose in life. You decide what your purpose is, and you alone are living that purpose. So you have a purpose behind the purpose in your life, and that is your conscience and to make the world better. And what he gave the people interned during the Holocaust, an idea that the Allies are coming, that there was a reason for hope, that they could get justice if they just lived. He gave the people there a reason to live. And Viktor Frankl became very important to me because he came up with the idea of a statue of responsibility. And I have taken that as to a personal mission in my life mentally. There should be a statue of responsibility standing on Alcatraz, perhaps, facing out over the Golden Gate Bridge. The Statue of Liberty stands in Battery Park on Ellis Island, welcoming in immigrants to a free country, free to be all you can be, free to win, free to choose, free to lose, free to be all you can be. But on the other coast, there should be a statue reminding us that freedom isn't free, that we're responsible for facing the consequences and the rewards of each decision we make every day. And Frankl was the one who said there should be a statue of responsibility so that people would take to heart the purpose they have for the decisions that they make sure they're doing things that benefit human life and humankind rather than their own selfish motives. So Frankl was a big hero of mine, and I had the good fortune to attend his lectures at United States International University, which is now Alliant University. Very, very important in my life. As was Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale was the author of The Strangest Secret. And the strangest secret is we become what we think about most of the time. Yes, it is the original law of attraction. Thoughts become things. Everything was a thought until it became a thing that wasn't of God or wasn't of nature. And so everything that you imagine, if you put concrete words and structures and ideas and written goals to it, becomes concrete evidence, material evidence of the imaginations that you had that took physical form. Every invention was first an image in the mind of a man or a woman upon the earth. Incredible idea. So Earl Nightingale heard one of my cassette tapes in Florida, and he said, you know, you have a kind voice, a believable voice, not a dramatic voice, not a radio voice or a television voice, but a believable voice, and I think you've got good stuff. So if you're ever in Chicago, you should stop by and see my partner, Lloyd Conant. And it just so happened that a couple of years later, I was able to record the Psychology of Winning, which became at the time the most listened to program in the world on personal enrichment and self-leadership. And the Psychology of Winning also, believe it or not, came out of my love for and the heroes in my life during that time, POWs, prisoners of war, the Jeremiah Dentons, the Jim Stockdales, the prisoners of war who were both in World War II and Korea and in Vietnam, who were in solitary confinement for months upon years or years after months, and were doing within. They were always thinking about getting home, being with their family. And they were creating in the 8x8 cell. They were playing golf in their minds. They were doing the scriptures, reproducing the scriptures. They were tapping on their pipe, Morse code, saying goodnight, doing parts of the Bible and the scriptures on their metal pipes inside their cages. The POWs were inspirational to me because I took that concept of prisoner of war and began to study them, and I wrote a thesis, a doctoral thesis on why no American prisoner escaped from a minimum security camp, but many escaped from maximum security camps. And that's because when you're in a maximum security camp, you're a leader and you're bent on action. When you're in a minimum security camp, you're serving your time and you don't make waves. But leaders are put in maximum security camps. And I found that the POWs that I most thought were the heroes were the ones that were thinking of being home, of their families, of creating, of writing, musical composition, scripture passages. Colonel George Hall playing golf in his mind, and he came back shooting a 76. He hadn't played golf for 5 years. The idea of always doing within when you're doing without, no matter the circumstance, took the whole idea of prisoner of war, and I turned that into Prince of Wales, Power of Women, putting on weight, psychology of winning, my dad was right. Life is a perception to the eye of the beholder. And so the POWs were my heroes. The astronauts, of course, have been heroes. All the people who gave their life in the wars to protect our freedom are unsung heroes. The unknown soldier is a hero of mine, definitely. And last but not least, I have to tell you, Ralph, one of the greatest heroes in my life is a Mexican gardener at our home now named Jose. Jose has our garden, and I told him that it's his garden, that we just happen to live here, and he is so exquisitely gifted at what he does that he treats every living plant and tree and flower as if it is a living creation coming from God. And he comes every Friday, unassuming, in his pickup truck, and Jose is the hero of my life. Never be on TV, probably doesn't do social media, probably doesn't have a computer. I think he's here legally, but he may not be. But what's important to me is the hero role that he plays. He does what he does without being told what to do. He does it for the sheer exhilaration of doing something to benefit this beautiful landscape. And quietly we watch him as he decides himself what is his mission for the day. Which tree will he prune? Which rosebush will he cut? Which flower will he enhance? What will he do with the grass this day? What will he do with his flower pot? What will he water? What will he weed whack? What will he do with this magnificent garden of his that he has taken upon himself to be the caretaker of? He doesn't get paid much. He doesn't get much attention from the media, if any. He may never. But on the other hand, Jose is one of the greatest heroes I've ever met. He and I are equal, man to man. We look at each other and he says, "Oh, senor, you are so good." And I said, "No, you know, Jose, where are you going?" He said, I send all my money to Mexico to my family, and we have a wonderful piece of land there. And I get to go twice a year, and I'm going again over the holidays. And he said, and I'm going to go down, I send my money there, and it helps the whole family. It helps them all live. And I'm going down there, and it's my sister's 50th wedding anniversary. And we're going to have the mariachis, and we're going to have the greatest cow's milk, and we're going to have the greatest cerveza, the greatest margaritas, the greatest mariachis, the greatest dancing, the greatest music, the greatest fiesta. It's going to be such a great family reunion. I can hardly wait to go. And I said, "Oh, Jose, I would so love to go." And he said, "You could come. I'm happy to invite you. You're welcome to come to Rancho Grande in Mexico." And I said, "Oh, muchas gracias, Jose. I'd love to be there with you." And there it is. The real heroes won't be covered by the media. And yes, I love the 9/11 defenders. I love those who gave their lives. I love those heroes who ran into the buildings. I love those who take people out of burning buildings, who dig people out of earthquakes, who save people during wars and pestilence and fires and forest fires and every kind of flood and earthquake possible. I love those heroes. But I also love the unsung, everyday, day-to-day, average, wonderful, marvelous heroes, especially my friend Jose, whose mission in life of planting shade trees in our property, on our property, under which he'll never sit, and I'll plant my own type of shade tree under which I myself will never sit. And that, my friend Ralph, is my long soliloquy definition of heroes. And I know I've gone over on this little podcast with you, but I hope that the viewers understand that I'm so passionate, I'm so honored, I'm so grateful that I've been given the privilege of life. And I'm going to spend every moment of my life from the rest of my life, however much I'm given, to just make it just a little better for every living thing that I touch. Again, Ralph, thank you so much, and look forward to our next session, and look forward to watching more of your hero podcasts and programs. You've done a great thing, and as I say, it's been a labor of love for your whole life. And God bless you, and thank you so much for having me.